The first true chill of December had settled over the city, and with it came the familiar, comforting weight of tradition. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the morning light gild the bare branches of the old oak tree in the yard. In my hand was a fresh notepad, its crisp, blue lines an empty canvas waiting for a masterpiece. This was my ritual, as sacred as any midnight mass, the creation of the Christmas shopping list. The kingdom of my kitchen was preparing for its annual coronation. My pen moved with a certainty born of 40 years. Sweet potatoes, the deep orange ones, not the pale imitations. Fresh cranberries, for the relish that needed just the right balance of sweet and sharp. Heavy cream, pounds of butter, dark molasses for the gingerbread. Each item was not just an ingredient, it was a character in the story of our Christmas. I could already smell the cinnamon and nutmeg warming in the oven, hear the gentle hum of the refrigerator packed with marinating meats and rising dough. The sweet potato soufflé, a cloud of flavor that melted on the tongue, the rum-soaked black cake, dark and potent, a secret recipe passed down from my own grandmother. These were not mere dishes. They were my legacy, laid out on a platter. I was mentally calculating the precise quantity of pecans for the pie when the phone rang, its shrill tone a discordant note in my symphony of planning. I saw Marcus's name on the caller ID and smiled. My son was always eager for the holiday, even as a grown man. He appreciated the effort, I knew he did. "Marcus, hello," I said, my voice warm. "I was just finalizing the list. I think I have found a new source for the rum for the black cake, a distillery upstate that." "Mom," his voice was a single, flat word. It stopped me mid-sentence. There was a tension there, a strain I had not heard since he was a teenager caught in a fib. "I need to talk to you about Christmas." "What about it? You are still coming on the 23rd, are you not? Your father is already planning to rearrange the living room furniture for the tree." I tried to inject a lightness into my tone that I suddenly did not feel. "We are coming, yes, of course we are." He paused, and I could hear him take a shallow breath. "It is just, Chloe and I were talking. With her work being so hectic and the travel, we thought, well, Chloe thinks it would be so much easier on everyone if we catered the meal this year." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and foreign. Catered asterisk. It sounded like something from a corporate seminar, not a family Christmas. I actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Marcus, do not be ridiculous. What on earth would we do with a catered Christmas dinner? The containers alone would fill the recycling bin." "Mom, I am serious." The firmness in his tone was like a door slamming shut. The laughter died in my throat. "It is a lot of work for you. Chloe thought it would be a nice gesture to give you a break. We could order from that excellent place downtown, the one with the roasted beet salad. It would be modern. Easy." Easy asterisk. The word was a small, sharp needle. Since when was our family about what was easy? Our traditions were built on effort, on the love measured out in cups and teaspoons. My pride, a deep, simmering thing I rarely acknowledged, rose up hot and swift. "A roasted beet salad," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Marcus, I have been cooking Christmas dinner since before you were born. I do not need a break from my own family." "It is not just about you," he said, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping in, the shield he always raised when Chloe's ideas were challenged. "It is about all of us having a relaxed holiday. No one is expecting you to slave away in the kitchen for 3 days." "I do not asterisk slave asterisk," I said, the words icy. "I create. There is a difference." The shopping list on the counter seemed to mock me now, its careful script suddenly naive. All my plans, my sweet potato soufflé, my rum cake, reduced to slaving asterisk. The conversation did not last much longer. There were hollow pleasantries, a promise to talk more later, and then the dial tone buzzed in my ear, a sound of finality. I stood there for a long time, the receiver growing warm in my hand. The bright December morning outside the window seemed to dim. The dissolution of my kingdom had not been announced with a proclamation, but with a phone call, a suggestion from a daughter-in-law who preferred roasted beets to sweet potato soufflé. I needed to hear a friendly voice, one that understood the weight of a family recipe. I dialed Uncle Ray. He was not my uncle by blood, but by 40 years of friendship and every single one of my Christmases. He had been there for the first tentative turkey, the year I forgot the salt in the dressing, the triumphant debut of the black cake. He answered on the second ring. "Grace, Do you need me to pick up the bourbon for the glaze today? The simple, assumed knowledge of our ritual was nearly my undoing. A tightness gripped my throat. Ray, I managed, my voice thick. Marcus just called. I relayed the conversation, my words tumbling out in a rush. I told him about the catering, the beet salad, the word easy. I expected him to chuckle, to dismiss it as a young couple's foolishness, but he was silent for a long moment after I finished. Grace, he said finally, and his voice had lost its usual jovial rumble. It was grave, quiet. You must understand what this is. It is an insult, I said, the heat returning. It is Chloe not appreciating the work that goes into a real family holiday. It is more than that, Ray said. His words were slow, deliberate, like stones being dropped into a still pond. This is not about food. It never is. This is about the throne. The throne. The head of the table, Grace. Your table. You are the matriarch of this family. That kitchen is your domain. That meal is your annual reminder to everyone of where the heart of this family resides. It is your legacy. That woman is not just suggesting a change of menu. She is testing the walls. She is seeing if the glue that holds this family together is still strong, or if it can be replaced with something from a downtown caterer. His words landed with a terrifying weight. He was right. It was not about the sweet potatoes or the rum cake. It was about the stories told while peeling apples, the way my granddaughter always sneaked a taste of the cookie dough, the way my husband carved the turkey with the same knife his father used. It was the glue, and Marcus was helping her loosen it. What do I do, Ray? The question was a whisper. I felt unmoored, the foundations of my world shifting beneath my feet. You do not give an inch, he said, his voice firm. You cook your dinner, you set your table, you show them what a real family Christmas is. Because if you concede this, Grace, you are conceding everything. You are handing her the crown. We talked a few minutes more, but his warning echoed in my head long after we hung up. I looked around my kitchen, at the well-worn counters, the stove that had seen so many feasts. It was not just a room, it was the heart of our home. And now it was under siege. Later that evening, as I was putting away the notepad, my phone chimed with a new text message. It was from Chloe. My breath caught. The preview on the screen showed only a few words, but they were enough to make my blood run cold. Hi Grace, I hope you are well. Marcus said he talked to you. I have a menu from the caterer I would love for you to look at. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. Attached was a link. I did not open it. I just stared at the words pleasantly surprised, feeling not surprise, but a cold, certain dread. The battle for Christmas had begun, and the first shot had been fired not with a shout, but with a text message. The silence in my kitchen on Christmas Eve morning was a physical presence, a heavy, cold blanket that had settled over everything while I slept. I stood in the doorway, my worn slippers whispering against the polished floor, and felt the absence of sound like a blow. For 20 years, this room had been the heart of the house, the engine of our holidays, ringing with the percussive music of clattering pots and sizzling butter, the low hum of the oven, and my own off-key singing along to the carols on the radio. Today, there was nothing. The copper pots, which I had scrubbed to a high shine just yesterday, hung from their rack like museum exhibits untouched. The counters were bare, not a stray sprig of parsley or a dusting of flour in sight. The air, usually thick with the warm, sweet scent of baking and simmering spices, was sterile and still. I had surrendered my command post without a fight, but standing here now, the reality of it hollowed me out. It was not just a kitchen, it was my territory, and it had been annexed without so much as a discussion. My gaze drifted to the window, where the weak winter light did little to brighten the room. I thought of the frenzy that would normally be underway at this very moment, the intricate ballet of basting the turkey, the rhythmic chopping for the stuffing, the careful layering of my grandmother's lasagna. Each recipe was a thread in the tapestry of our family's history, a story told in taste and aroma. Now, there was nothing for me to do but wait. The instruction had been clear, delivered by Marcus with a patronizing pat on my shoulder. Do not lift a finger, Mother. Chloe has it all under control. You have earned a rest. A rest. The word tasted like ash. He made it sound like a reward, but it felt like a dismissal, a polite shelving of something, of me, that was no longer deemed essential. Hours later, the silence followed me into the car, and then into the foyer of Marcus and Chloe's meticulously renovated home. The air here was different, not warm and inviting, but cool and laden with the anonymous, sanitized smell of commercial cleaning products and food that had traveled in plastic containers. I followed the sound of polite murmuring to the dining room, and the sight that greeted me made my heart sink. The table was a picture of sterile perfection, a magazine spread come to life. The china was pristine, the crystal glasses gleamed under the artful lighting, and the silverware was arranged with geometric precision. But the centerpiece was not a platter bearing a golden, steaming turkey. Instead, a collection of stainless steel catering trays, each nestled in its own chafing dish, sat like impersonal monuments to efficiency. The family was already seated, their postures stiff. My grandchildren, Lily and Ben, usually a whirlwind of excitement, were unusually quiet, their eyes wide as they looked from the strange trays to their parents. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, was a vision of controlled elegance in a crisp white blouse, a tight, professional smile etched on her face. And Marcus, my son, he looked strained, his eyes avoiding mine as he stood to pull out my chair. "Everything looks wonderful, Chloe," I said, the words feeling foreign and false on my tongue. "Thank you, Grace," she replied, her voice smooth as polished glass. "We wanted to make it easy on everyone this year." Easy, the word reverberated in my head. Since when was Christmas about easy? Since when was the labor of love, the mess, the glorious chaos of it all something to be avoided? I sat, the chair feeling strangely formal and uncomfortable beneath me. The meal began, and the quiet discomfort grew into a palpable force. The food was dished out with impersonal efficiency. The turkey, when it reached my plate, was dry and slightly stringy, having waited too long under the heat lamps. The gravy was lukewarm and tasted faintly of thyme from a jar, not the rich, deep flavor of pan drippings and fresh herbs. The macaroni and cheese, the one dish I had foolishly hoped might retain some soul, was a tragedy of blandness, the cheese sauce congealing into a gluey film. There were no lively debates about the correct amount of sage in the stuffing, no laughter as someone recounted the year the gravy boat tipped over, no groans of contentment. Just the gentle clinking of forks on plates, and the murmur of conversation, so polite it was painful. "The potatoes are very smooth, dear," I offered to Chloe, searching for some point of connection. "They are from a wonderful gourmet service downtown," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Everything is organic, of course." I nodded, feeling a desperate, rising panic. This was not our Christmas. We were not a family here. We were a collection of well-dressed strangers at a corporate luncheon, playing our parts with a stiff, formal grace. The absence of my food was not just an absence of flavor. It was an absence of memory, of tradition, of asterisk us asterisk. I could feel the phantom weight of my own serving spoons in my hand, the ghost of a gravy stain on my apron. I looked at Marcus, willing him to meet my gaze, to share a moment of silent understanding, a flicker of regret for what had been lost. But he was focused on cutting his turkey into perfectly symmetrical pieces, a deep furrow of concentration on his brow. It was when Chloe began explaining the virtues of the cranberry relish, a saccharine concoction that bore no resemblance to the tart, chunky relish I made with orange zest, that I could no longer hold my tongue. The words came out softly, laced with a sadness I could not conceal. "I suppose I just miss the old ways a little," I said, looking down at my plate. "The chaos, the smells, it felt like home." Chloe's smile tightened. "I understand that, Grace, I do, but traditions have to evolve. Everyone was just so tired of the same old things every year. We all agreed it was time for a change." The words landed with the force of a physical slap. "Everyone? Tired?" My eyes swept around the table. Lily was pushing her macaroni around her plate. Ben was looking longingly at his phone. And Marcus, he was staring at his wife with a look of pained admiration, as if she had just articulated a profound truth. The betrayal, which had been a cold knot in my stomach all day, began to burn. "Tired of it?" I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "The same old things, those recipes were your grandmother's, Marcus. They are a part of this family's story." Chloe's composure finally cracked. "It is just food, Grace. It is just one meal. Can you not just relax and enjoy not having to work for once?" The room fell into a deathly hush. All eyes were on me. This was the moment. This was when a son would stand up for his mother, for the history she represented. This was when Marcus would gently but firmly tell his wife that she had gone too far, that my feelings mattered. I turned to him, my eyes pleading, my heart a fragile, exposed thing in my chest. He cleared his throat, a nervous, shallow sound. He would not look at me. His gaze was fixed on the space between his plate and his wine glass. "Mother," he began, his voice unnaturally calm, "Chloe has a point. It is the people that matter, not the food. We are all here together. That is what is important. Let us not make a scene." The world narrowed to the sound of his voice, each word a precise, surgical cut. Let us not make a scene. The true, devastating blow was not Chloe's defensive cruelty. It was this. It was my own son's weak, cowardly acquiescence. He was not just agreeing with her, he was dismissing me, my history, my love as a potential scene. The foundation of my world, the unshakable belief that my son was my ally, crumbled into dust in that instant. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, a dizzying wave of humiliation and grief washing over me. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that was horribly loud in the quiet room. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice strangled. I did not look at any of them as I turned and walked away from the table, the perfect, terrible table, my footsteps echoing in the profound silence I left behind. The betrayal was complete, and as I retreated, a single, terrifying thought began to take root in the ashes of my heart, a thought that promised not grief, but a reckoning. The silence in my apartment was a physical thing, a heavy blanket smothering everything. I had stopped answering my phone days ago. The buzzing was like a fly trapped against a window, a persistent annoyance I could ignore if I focused hard enough on the nothingness. The world outside my window had celebrated the turning of the year without me. I had watched the distant fireworks from my couch, little bursts of color that meant nothing, their muffled pops like a heartbeat from another room. The new year had arrived, but I was still stuck in the old one, in the crushing echo of Marcus's words. "Just give me the recipes." It was not the anger that frightened me. Anger I understood. Anger had a heat, a purpose. This was worse. This was a hollowed-out feeling, as if the very core of me had been scooped away, leaving only a cold, empty vessel. A more insistent knocking started at the door. I ignored it, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. It was probably Chloe again, her texts shifting from defensive to pleading. I could not face her. The knocking stopped for a moment, and I felt a flicker of relief. Then I heard the jingle of keys, the scrape of metal in the lock. My heart jumped into my throat. Only one person had a key. The door swung open and Uncle Ray filled the frame, his large body a silhouette against the bright hallway light. He did not look angry. He looked sad. His eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, scanned the dim room, taking in the drawn curtains, the takeout containers piled by the door, me curled on the couch like a ghost. "Grace," he said, his voice low and gravelly. He did not ask if I was okay. He could see that I was not. "I do not want to talk about it, Uncle Ray," I mumbled into the blanket. "I know," he said, closing the door softly behind him. He moved through the apartment with a quiet familiarity, not turning on more lights but opening the curtains. The gray January light flooded in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He sat heavily in the armchair opposite me, the old leather sighing under his weight. For a long time, he just sat there, not pushing, just being. His presence was a solid anchor in my sea of numbness. "Your grandmother," he began, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere in the past. "My mother, she was a force of nature. But you know that. You have heard the stories. But there is a story we do not tell often." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his large hands clasped together. "The stories we tell at Christmas, they are about the big pots of gumbo, the tables groaning with food. They are true, but they are not the whole truth. They are the victory lap, not the race." I slowly sat up, the blanket falling away. The emptiness inside me shifted, making room for a prickling curiosity. During the Great Migration, when she was just a girl, her family packed what they could carry and left Louisiana for Chicago. 10 children, Grace. 10. And her mama, our grandmother, had to feed them all with next to nothing. The recipes you hold, they were not created in a kitchen full of light and laughter. They were born in desperation. They were a map of survival. His voice grew thick with emotion. A handful of beans, a ham bone that had been boiled so many times it was pure white, some foraged greens from a vacant lot, that had to become a meal that would fill 10 hungry bellies and give them the strength to face another day of prejudice and backbreaking work. Every ingredient was accounted for. Every scrap was sacred. It was not about flavor, not then. It was about love made visible. It was about keeping her family alive. I felt the air leave my lungs. The recipe cards, the ones I had guarded so fiercely, they were not just instructions. They were a diary of struggle. They were a testament. The stains were not just oil and spice, they were the fingerprints of my great-grandmother's love, the sweat of her brow. She taught my mother everything, Ray continued, and Mama, she taught me. She taught me that cooking for someone is an act of faith. You are believing they will be there to eat it. You are believing in a future, a togetherness. When you give that food, you are giving a piece of that history, that survival. It is not a convenience. It is a covenant. The hollowness inside me was gone, replaced by a burning clarity. I looked at Uncle Ray, really looked at him, and saw the weight of that history in his eyes. He had given me more than recipes, he had given me a legacy, and Marcus had asked for it like it was a takeout menu. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky but determined. I need to see Marcus, I said. Uncle Ray simply nodded. You do what you need to do, baby girl. I did not call ahead, I just went. When Marcus opened his door, his face was a mixture of surprise and caution. He looked tired. Grace, he started. I am not here to fight, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to show you something. Can I come in? He stepped aside. His apartment was neat, sterile almost, compared to the warm clutter of mine. I walked to his kitchen table and carefully laid my recipe box down. I opened the lid. The smell of old paper, oil, and memories wafted out. I did not look at him. I pulled out the first card. Gumbo Z-herbs, I said, my finger tracing my grandmother's tight, elegant script. This was not always a celebratory dish. It was a clean-out-the-kitchen dish, made with any greens you could find, mustard, turnip, collard, dandelion, whatever was left at the end of a hard week. It was made with scraps, but it was made with love. It was meant to nourish, to fortify. I held up the card, showing him the dark stain in the corner. This stain is not grease, Marcus. That is my grandmother's tear. She told me she cried into the pot the day her brother left for the war, praying this food would keep him safe. I picked up another. Red beans and rice, Monday's meal, because Monday was wash day and the pot could simmer all day on the stove while she scrubbed clothes on a washboard. This recipe is not just a list of ingredients, it is a schedule of a woman's labor, a testament to her endurance. One by one, I laid the cards on his table. I told him the story behind each one, the joy, the sorrow, the struggle embedded in every instruction. This pinch of sugar was a luxury saved for months. This andouille sausage was a treat that meant a good week at the factory. I was not accusing him. I was simply showing him the truth. I was making him see the soul of the thing he had wanted to reduce to data. He did not speak. He just listened, his eyes moving from the stained cards to my face and back again. I watched his expression change from defensiveness to confusion, and finally, to a dawning, painful understanding. He reached out, not to touch me, but to hover his fingers over a card for cornbread, the edges soft and worn from generations of use. I did not know, he whispered, the words barely audible. I did not understand. I know, I said, and for the first time, I believed that he truly did not. The days that followed were quiet, but the silence was different. It was contemplative, not empty. Then, on New Year's Day, a day traditionally meant for black-eyed peas and collard greens for luck and money, there was another knock at my door. I opened it to find Marcus and Chloe standing on my welcome mat. Chloe's eyes were red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped. Marcus held a reusable grocery bag bulging with vegetables. Chloe held another. They did not offer apologies. The words would have been too small, too cheap for the chasm that had opened between us. Instead, Marcus held up the bag. His voice was quiet, stripped of all its usual tech bro confidence. Grace, he said, we cannot change what happened, but we would like to learn, not for the app, not for convenience. We want to learn for the connection, if you will let us. I looked from his hopeful, uncertain face to Chloe's remorseful one. The rift was still there, a crack in the foundation of our friendship. But Uncle Ray's words echoed in my mind. Tradition is not about perfection, it is about passing down the story. Healing was not going to be a single moment. It would be a process. It would start with an onion. I stepped back and held the door open wider. Come in, I said. The first lesson is always the onions. They shuffled inside, their movements hesitant. I led them to the kitchen and handed each of them a knife and a yellow onion. I demonstrated how to slice it, how to dice it, my own movements a meditation born of 1,000 repetitions. They watched, then mimicked, their cuts clumsy at first. The only sound was the rhythmic chop, chop, chop of knives on wood. The sharp, cleansing scent of onion filled the air, a smell that was the beginning of almost every good thing I knew how to make. Chloe sniffled, and I was not sure if it was from the onion or from emotion. Marcus focused intently on his task, his brow furrowed in concentration. We were not okay. We were a long way from okay. But we were in the same room. We were chopping onions together. It was a fragile, hopeful beginning. And as I watched Marcus carefully sweep his imperfect dice into a bowl, I knew the next step would be to light the flame under the pot, and to tell them the story of the first time my grandmother let me do it, and how scared I was I would get it wrong. The story was just beginning.